My name is Michael Bass, and I am the chair of the steering committee of JCRC's Esther Raab Holocaust Museum and Goodwin Education Center. Thank you for joining us tonight. On November 1st, 2005, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution designating January 27th of each year as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. This date was chosen because it is the anniversary of the liberation of the largest and most infamous World War II death camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau, located in southern Poland. Tonight actually marks the 80th anniversary of that liberation. The UN has urged every one of its members to honor, quote, the 6 million Jewish victims, 1/3 of the Jewish people, along with countless members of other minorities who died at the hands of the Nazis, unquote. The resolution also asks its members to promote the development of educational programs to combat anti-Semitism and hate wherever they occur. The resolution also rejected any form of Holocaust denial and encouraged member states to preserve sites that the Nazis used in carrying out their final solution. This includes the preservation of killing centers, concentration camps, ghettos, mass burial sites, and prisons. In the last year, our community has lost 12 Holocaust survivors, reminding us how important it is for all of us to continue to not just remember, but to learn and educate others about the need to stand up against hatred and anti-Semitism in all its forms. We hope you are all able to watch the film Here Lived, and if you have not yet, there is still time to view it until tomorrow. This evening, we will hear from the producer and director of the film, Jane Wells. Jane is an Emmy Award-nominated filmmaker and activist with groundbreaking documentaries chronicling a diverse range of social issues. In Here Lived, Wells and her team capture the story of the world's largest decentralized memorial, exploring the unknown history of the Netherlands' hidden children, and give a platform to the relatives of Nazi victims and key figures in the Stolpersteiner Project. As we learned in the film, these handmade stones have been placed in over 30 European countries and mark the last residence of choice of those who ended up being murdered by the Nazis. They are a deeply personal memorial and serve as a source of healing and reconciliation. As the daughter of Sidney Bernstein, who was responsible for documenting the liberation of Nazi concentration camps for the Allies in World War II, Jane knows the power film has to shape history and empower survivors. This history led her to build her own legacy as a filmmaker focused on telling the stories of survivors of crimes against humanity. Jane is currently at Auschwitz commemorating the 80th anniversary of its liberation. As such, she graciously met with us earlier this month as we pre-recorded our conversation with her as she spoke to Raab Goodwin volunteers, Diane Bannon, Chris Gwynn, and Carol Orwitz. Please enjoy our conversation and insight into the film.
Hello, my name is Carol Orwitz. On behalf of the Esther Raab Holocaust Museum and Goodwin Education Center, my colleagues Diane Bannon, Chris Gwynn, and I are honored to speak with Jane Wells, director of the film Here Lived. We'll be alternating asking questions and sit back and enjoy the evening. From the mission statement on your website, for your film company, 3 Generations, you say that your father was the main influence for your work that you do today. Can you talk about your father, his role during World War II, and how you've worked to honor your family legacy, and how the film Here Lived fits into your family legacy?
Okay. Lots of questions in the one question. So my father, Sidney Bernstein, grew up in the United Kingdom, and by the time the Second World War came, he was too old to serve as in battle, but he was selected to work for the Ministry of Information. So until the United States came into the war, his job was to use film to convince the Americans to join the war effort. And after the Americans joined the war effort, he eventually moved on to SHAEF, which under General Eisenhower, And his job then was to go as the Allies advanced through Europe and select the films that would be shown in movie theaters as the Allies occupied. And because of that, he ended up at Bergen-Belsen within a couple of days of the British liberating Belsen. And there he immediately saw that what was happening had to be recorded on film. And at that point, he sent for audio to record the survivors and for them to give their testimony in what has now been understood to be the first Holocaust testimony ever recorded with film and audio. And as a result of that, he took on the task, was given the task to document the atrocities in the concentration camps, which he did throughout the spring and summer of 1945. And he brought Alfred Hitchcock in to assist him in finding a way to show that these horrific images were real and had not been altered or doctored in any way. And they worked on that. And then, sadly, by September 1945, the American and British governments decided that they did not want to finish the film and show it to German audiences. And the whole project was shelved unceremoniously and basically was not seen again for 40 years. And the finished film was not complete until 2014. So that's the story of my father and also of Hitchcock too, because they both vowed to never speak of that footage again. And indeed, my father didn't until he was about 85 years old. So that story, then time marched on. And in 1985, I was tasked with the job of selling the revamped version to American audiences in a version called A Painful Reminder. And that was the beginning of my sort of film television career here in the United States. And so really, one way and another, my family has been working with this Holocaust material for 80 years now. And again, a lapse in time. And I was interested in what was happening in Darfur, in the genocide in Darfur, and I happened upon a young man called Brian Steigel, who tried to let the American government know what was happening in Darfur, and they did not want him to go public with the information. And it just reminded me of what had happened with my father. And so I decided to produce a film about the genocide in Darfur called The Devil Came on Horseback. And that's when my organization was born and formed. And here we are today, 20 years later.
And how does this film fit into your legacy?
I think that what really struck me when I first heard about Gunter Demnig and the Stolperstein was that the story of what happened in the Holocaust and in the Netherlands has really been dominated in all popular culture by Anne Frank. And it gives a very different, the Anne Frank story is incredibly important, obviously, but what we don't hear a lot about are the majority of Jews in the Netherlands. I think 70% of them were in fact killed in the camps, and that story has dominated. So I was interested, I'm always interested in telling the story behind the story we know, because I always figure if I didn't know that, then there must be many, many people who didn't know that. And I think it's a beautiful story because there is healing and reconciliation for the families that can place the Stolperstein. And there's one other thing I wanted to say about that. I had seen Stolperstein for the first time. I noticed them in Rome about 10 years ago, and in the ghetto in Rome, and I took photographs actually. And I just assumed that they were put there by the municipality of Rome. I had no idea who Gunter Demnig was, and I didn't know about how huge this project had become and is continuing to be. So I had stumbled upon them, but again, I didn't really know the story, and we make assumptions about things and we get on with our lives. And I wanted to tell Gunther's story because I think it's an incredibly uplifting and important story.
Great, thank you. Diane?
Jane, your work is incredible. I am truly honored here to be speaking with you. Your film was beautifully written and executed, and you were able to weave so many elements of this both sensitive and heartbreaking history and brought it down to a personal level, which is so important to us as Holocaust educators. We struggle with time limitations and the maturity of our students and what we can fit into our short time frames, and I can see this film being used over and over again. You offer a specific overview. You allow the students to consider the trauma to the victims and the generations after. And also it enlightens those who choose to volunteer in this position in keeping memories alive. So for me, it was the perfect example of one person can make a difference. What were your considerations in deciding how to shoot the film?
I really felt that each stone has its own story, and I was desperately trying to figure out how to look at a small square brass object and somehow make it universal. So we decided to try and work with the idea of the drone camera. It took a while. I went there, the first time I went there to film, we tried to do it without a drone. And although at this point in time, I would say drones are overused, but I did like I saw it more as focusing down on that one person's story or what we could learn about an individual in that way. So we did do that. And candidly, you're not really supposed to film with drones in Amsterdam because of air traffic control problems and such. So we found a way to do it very close to the ground so it didn't interfere with other communications around. And I feel that worked out well. The other thing is that I was very moved during the time of filming by the way the various people there clean the stones. And that was something that really, again, I didn't know that one could do that. The first one I saw in Rome actually had a cigarette butt stubbed out on it, and I reflexively moved it aside. But I hadn't known that I could get down on my knees and clean one. So we did film a lot of different people cleaning the stones because I think it is another way of honoring those victims. And I found that incredibly moving, just to be present while those stones were being cleaned. And I hope that people who see the film and then stumble upon a stone somewhere in Europe will feel that they really can go and clean them.
I agree. I just want to tell you as a viewer, my view of that when I saw it was the image of someone coming home. And so that played into what you were trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pass this to Chris.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane, for your filmmaking. This is tremendously powerful. I'm curious about Ulrike Citron. I wonder how you connected with her and how strongly was she the impetus for the filmmaking?
Great question, because she is on the board of my organization, 3 Generations. She came in relatively recently, and I didn't know her very well. And over a lunch, she told me about the Stolperstein project. And that was when I was like, wow, we should try and do something about this. And my first thought was that it was going to be a short 10-minute film. And then it grew into a feature documentary. And she came on as producer and really had an enormous influence on me and the film. And I was really honored to be able to tell her family story because it's an incredibly moving story. And she was very, very open and trusting with us. And I really, really appreciate that so much. I think it's great to have a a story like hers.
Yeah, thank you. I want to ask also about Gunter Demning, if I could. I'm so curious about the aspect of his project in which the stones are made by hand. And I think that this is a very important aspect that I don't think a lot of people think about. I'm curious, as a creative filmmaker, how you feel about that aspect of the project, that he has determined that these stones should be made one by hand. And I'm curious what you think about the project in general. Do you think his goal is more honoring the victims or teaching the future generations?
Well, I think that, well, first I have to say that Gunter is a mercurial character. He does not like to be on film very much. He's quite hard to track down because he's constantly in his red van going to the next place and the next place, and he doesn't like to fly. So he spends a lot of time in that van. But I think that he is first and foremost an artist. And I think because he's an artist, the idea of crafting his work by hand is just essential to who he is. So the idea of mass producing them, I think it will never happen, in his lifetime, and it's anathema to him. But he also has been a teacher. So I think the educational aspect of it is always there in the back of his mind. So I think the two things work hand in hand. But frankly, and I think it comes through in the film, he had no idea that this was going to become what it has become. And I think sometimes he's really quite almost overwhelmed by it, because it's not what, it's just not what he was expecting. And another thing I want to say here is that when we finished the film, I really thought that there would be more interest in his project from the art community in this country. And I'm a little, we don't have the budget for PR and a lot of outreach. I think the film has been incredibly beautifully received by the Jewish community, for which I'm incredibly grateful. But I truly think that the art world is missing on a very, very important man and work here. And I wish that we could do more in that regard.
Thank you.
Jane, Gunter Demnig and Alexander Stukenberg are both Germans, and they discuss the need, in effect, to assuage some of the national guilt felt by all Germans about the Holocaust and World War II. Stukenberg became openly emotional, trying to express the depth of the guilt. Did you ask them to discuss this topic, or did it come up in conversation because it's integral to the motivation and passion for their work? And for Stukenberg, do you think it's strong? Do you think which is stronger, the pride in the Stolperstein project or the guilt he feels as a German?
Oh, I think that those responses came up naturally, and I was not expecting them. I think that Alexander's emotional response in filming is much closer to the surface probably than Gunter's, because Gunter has been doing this for a lot longer. I think the fact that both are Germans and non-Jews is really important. And the young girl who in the film, who's Alexander's assistant, she's part of this incredible program that the German government does to send young people between school and university to do this kind of work. And I found how articulate and intelligent she was. I mean, speaking in English about the project and what she done, again, deeply moving and unexpected. I mean, it just, and the passion that she had, the ambassador as well. I mean, it's just incredibly impressive coming from the UK and I went to school with a Jewish quota, to living in the United States today. I mean, those things are just really impressive to me, especially at the moment we're living in now, which I can't speak to the sense of guilt that Alexander would feel. I think it's pretty evident, but I don't think it's his, I'm going to use a horrible wrong metaphor, his cross to bear. I think that it's just who he is. And thank God there are people who think the way he does in the world today.
Diane?
So the examination of the city of Harlem and the underlying mindset of anti-Semitism there provides the viewer with understanding of the city's collaboration with the Nazis to provide a list of where every Jewish family lived. That for me was so important that you involved that. So our students need to know the effects of choices and the impact of marginalizing a group. During this film, it was mentioned that most homeowners today would not allow a plaque to be put on their home. However, since sidewalks belong to the city, that was the perfect place to put these. This reminds us that anti-Semitism is still present as it is around the world. But the mayor of Harlem now and many others seem to be very much invested in the Stolperstein project. So did you learn of other cities in the Netherlands that were also supportive of this program?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, for this commemoration, in today's commemoration for January 27th, the film's being shown in various cities around the Netherlands and will be from January until May, which is the Liberation Day for the Dutch. There's been a very positive response. I think that mayor is exemplary because, again, as a non-Jew, he's a very devout Calvinist. He feels, he has a moral imperative to tell this story and to tell it to all the students in his town. And again, deeply moving to me personally just to see that. I think that, yeah, we have this obligation, but I also want to say here that recently in Germany, some of these stones have been defaced. And the last time I spoke to Gunther, it came up and he was like, every defaced stone will be replaced. And so he has definitely a commitment to go back and remake and replace any stone that has been recently defaced, which again is a commitment to the project and to the truth. Yes,
very important. Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, so I would like to ask a question about Maya, the intern. You had just mentioned her. I also was very moved by her participation in the project. I'm curious if in chatting with her, you came to understand her motivation for getting involved and if she has any concrete plans for after the internship.
Well, she's back in Germany and she's in university, but I don't know, it's too soon to know what her career trajectory would be because of that. But, she was there for a year and we went back and forth while she was there. And after she left, I did say to Alexander, how are you going to cope without Maya? And he said, well, another intern will come. And I said, but she could never be as amazing as Maya. And the new girl came and he said, she's incredible too. You've got to come and meet her. So I think it's just an absolutely top-notch program. And, and the German government does it in different cultural locations around the world. I met a young girl who is working at a poetry center in Rome through the same program. But I think to me, it's just a flagship program that the German government has. And I actually introduced Maya to the ambassador as an exemplar of something wonderful his government was doing there, because it is. I wish that, maybe we do have things like that in the State Department. I don't know. But, I have 4 kids, adult children, and I was just so impressed by how they embrace the work and how passionate they are about it. I would hire her in a heartbeat to do almost anything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jane, how did you connect with, and I may pronounce this wrong, Rainey Elkerboot? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I mean, I met her, it's sort of like Ulrika introduced me to Emil. Emil introduced me to Rainey because he actually lives in Harlem and she's running the program in his town. So yeah, that's how I met Rainey.
Did she put you in touch with Bella Levitt also? How did that come about?
Oh, that was through, I think Alexander told me about Bella because they had made the stones for that. So it all had a nice, I was like, oh, great, an American. Let's show how that can work for Americans here.
Right. As you learned more about Rainey's family Holocaust story and about Bella's Bat Mitzvah project, did you realize the power of the film as a vehicle for what Gunter Demnig calls the social sculpture of his art project? Can you discuss what Demnig means by social sculpture?
I'm going to say no to that. I mean, yes, but I don't think I could. I feel like people, there's so much community around a brass plaque that's how I would understand social sculpture to be, that they're creating something that really does intersect on every level with the place where it's placed, where the home of the person, you know, in that square where those people live, for Bella's family. So there's always a social element to it. People walk past them, they clean them, they don't, they lay them, people come when, I mean, it's almost universally true that every time there is a stone laying, that there is a community of people gathering round to place a stone. I have not heard of a single stone that got placed where there was nobody there but the stone maker and the layer. So it always is a social event, just by the nature of creating that sculpture that grows and grows.
Diane?
Jane, how do you get feedback from your film? Is it sent via your website, or what has been the feedback that you've received?
It's pretty I mean, the feedback has been positive. It's wonderful to have a conversation like this with you because it does make me feel like we're getting through to people in different ways. We don't have a tremendous amount of feedback on the website. We do have some through social media, but I'm not a big fan of social media at this point in time, and I prefer to have direct communication with people and through that filter. But we do, yeah, we hear from people. I mean, for example, I had a phone call this week from somebody who said, your film told my family's story. My parents saw it, but I wasn't able to see it. How can I see the film? I need to see the film. So that's, I think word of mouth. And I think there's something that you said earlier. This is not, I mean, I've made films before that were documentaries that were very sort of time specific, politically specific to a moment. I think this is a film that will have long legs because I think there's not much in it that is going to be untrue, irrelevant in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, because the stones will still be there and people will still be wanting to place them. So I think it does have a long life ahead of it.
Yes.
It would be nice to have a website, actually, now that you've made me think about that we probably should do that.
Sure, because I'm sure as we move it forward, sharing it with students, that you will have a lot of feedback.
That's a really great idea. I'm going to go out and try and raise some money to build a website for it now.
Okay.
And I would like to see some stones in this country because that was something that Gunter considered for the 100,000th stone. There was one they could have laid in Pennsylvania, but they decided to go back to Nuremberg for whatever reasons.
We should make that happen.
We should, yeah.
Chris?
I'm going to go back to Ulrika Citron just for a moment, if I could. And I think I'm curious about your experience with her and what you think she took away from the film. She said during the film that she returns to Holland often to try to get closure. And I'm curious if you feel that she's getting closure and what you know about what she plans to do going forward to be involved with this project.
Well, I think she will always be, because it's who she is, she will always be supportive of the project and of Gunther and Alexander. You know, Alexander and Ulrika and I have a group WhatsApp chat, and we talk about films and things we've seen. I think that there's some interesting things that are going to be happening in the Netherlands now and in 2025 and going forward, which is that they will be releasing more information about what happened to hidden children. As things stand now, while a hidden child is still alive, nobody else is allowed access to the story. And Ulrika's father is still alive. And I think that when he passes, she will probably be able to access a lot more information about what happened to him and to his siblings. And I think that, you know, just who the people were who took them in and so on. Her father is very protective of the people who took him in because he was separated from his siblings. And I think that that's very typical, quite typical of child survivors. And I suspect in the next 20 years, there will be a lot more information about collaboration. I mean, the collaboration information is coming out in 2025. So I think that she will probably, I mean, I cannot speak for her, but I would imagine that she's going to pursue some of that when she's legally able to do so.
And how do you feel about her sense of getting closure? Do you think that the participation in the film enhanced that for her or provided her with a new opportunity to think about her experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's a private person, so I think there are times when, you know, everybody hates the way their voice sounds and how they look, but I'd say she's been very brave, incredibly brave, and very caring. I mean, I think she's an incredible woman, and she didn't have to do this, and she did it, and she did open herself up more than I think she ever has. And her husband and her children have been super supportive of her, luckily. And, you know, I'm happy that that's the case for her.
There's always a bit of difficulty or potentially danger in someone telling their personal story in a public space so that other people can be educated and informed without removing the personal aspects, without making it so that they have to relive their pain so that someone else can learn. I think that's always a very difficult line in a creative project that has to do with history. I'm going to shift a little bit and ask about the general population. So I'm a teacher, and I have taken students to Germany on numerous occasions for exchanges with German schools. And many times we have taken the American and the German students to areas in the city, wherever we are, to encounter the Stolpersteine and for them to do small projects where they kind of stand off somewhere and observe general passersby and make notes about how the general population interacts with the stones. I've done that numerous times. So I'm very curious, in your filming, what did you observe about the general passersby? Did people interact with the film crew? Try to interact with you? Did you? What was your experience of the general population while you were filming? And the
mostly they were absolutely incredibly open, engaged, talked to us, wanted to know about the film. There was one thing that happened, which was when we were doing the big ceremony at the end for Bella. There was a lady who came out, got on her electric wheelchair, turned it round, drove it right over the laying of the stones, through all the family, the mourners, the ambassador, completely stone-faced, just doing her thing. We all had to get out of her way. She went to the store, she got some groceries, and then she came back and completely disrupted the whole thing anyway. And we were all like, and if the final scene on the film, you know, which is a drone shot coming away from there, her electric wheelchair is still there. I mean, and that is perhaps another way of talking about social sculpture. This is a disabled woman, and she was going out to do her shopping, and she just did her thing. Didn't pay any attention to any of us, didn't look anyone in the eye, and just.
What do you make of that? What was your reaction to that in the moment?
Well, in the moment, I was like, oh my goodness, you know, this is going to ruin the shit. But everybody was cool about it because it's her home, and it's her home, that, you know, and it's her life, you know. We were all we kind of smiled. It's because they are interacting with real people's real lives. And if you are in an electric wheelchair, you can't, I don't know. I wish she hadn't, but she did.
Yeah, we observed in our little projects that we did the number of people who didn't even notice them, you know, just going down the street, going where they're going, and the number of people who would stop and walk around them and think they couldn't step on them, and everything in between. It really is kind of a social experiment that yields interesting results. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, once you see them, it's hard to unsee them. And I think that's, you know, I get a lot of photographs from people saying, I was just in so-and-so and I saw this one. You know, people send me photo. It'd be really nice to, sorry, I'm just thinking it'd be great to have, you know, a website, an Instagram account where everybody could send them so we could all see them in different places and remember the names, you know.
What message would you like viewers to take from this film? How much do you think this film will influence future documentary film projects for you?
I think my hope for the film is that it will get more traction beyond the Jewish community, because I think that obviously the subject matter deserves the world's attention. I think what Gunter Demning has done in terms of a ever-growing art project deserves more attention. And I think that, you know, remembering individuals is, you know, I think it's just one of the most important things we can do in different ways. You know, there has been a cultural moment in this country, you know, say their names. I know that for me, after 9/11, you know, the New York Times printed the name at some point of every single person who died then. And I gave myself the discipline to read every single name, because it takes a really long time. And I think that we have to, I think that we have to remember people's names as best we can. We can't all remember everybody, but I was once told that in Aboriginal communities in Australia, people can name up to 7,000 of their ancestors. They have the capacity, I don't know if it's true, but it's a beautiful image to not just remember your parents, your grandparents, but names going back and back and back. And I feel like this is an opportunity we have to say names out loud, to bring a memory to that person, and to do that. And I think it's a good practice, because I think it is a practice. And to keep those stories and those lives alive.
Chris, Diane, do you have any other questions?
No,
I don't
just
have
to
any
thank
questions.
you.
Yeah, I don't have any question, but Jane, I just want you to know that we as educators will move this forward, and our audiences are not just selectively Jewish students. So we have a multitude of opportunities, and I can't thank you enough for doing this work.
Well, I just want to thank you for showing the film. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there in person with you for the commemoration, but I will be thinking of all of you when I'm at Auschwitz. And I hope that, we can meet in community, again, I would like to find a way at some point, somewhere, somehow, to bring Alexander and his tools to the United States or to North America and really show young people and students how the stones are made, because it's a very, very powerful experience to see them being created.
I think that's very possible. I think
Yeah.
that could be arranged. I want to thank you also. This has been a tremendous opportunity.
Thank you.
I want to thank you and also put out to the audience viewing, if you're interested in information about placing a Stolpersteine for your family, I wanted to give you the website with the information, and that's stolpersteine.eu, and that's STOLPERSTEINE.eu. I thought people out there might want to know. We have people in our community, survivors, families of survivors who might be interested. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're grateful to Jane for taking the time out of her busy schedule to speak to our community this evening, and to our Raab Goodwin volunteers for their dedication for bringing this event to us tonight. On behalf of the Raab Goodwin Center, thanks also to all who have attended tonight for this 2025 UN Holocaust Remembrance Day commemoration. I'd like to close this event with two very poignant quotes. The first is from Albert Einstein. Quote, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing." Unquote. And many years ago, from poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou, quote, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, it need not be lived again." Unquote. As a reminder, the film can still be viewed through tomorrow with the same link that was sent to your emails. In addition, for those who did not attend our Kristallnacht observance in November and missed Paula Apsel's film on Jewish resistance during World War II titled "Resistance, They Fought Back," please know that it will be shown on PBS tonight at 10 o'clock and thereafter can be viewed on pbs.org, the PBS app, or on the PBS video channel. Also, please mark your calendars for Wednesday, April 23rd for our annual Yom HaShoah commemoration. This year's speaker will be survivor Rosalie Simon, the aunt of Raab Goodwin volunteer Renee Chase, and the sister of Charlotte Weiss, Renee's mother, who passed away a few years ago. Please join us to learn about Rosalie's life in Czechoslovakia before the war, her deportation to Auschwitz, and her various escapes from death due to her perseverance, the help of her sisters, and the kindness of strangers. On behalf of the Raab Goodwin Center, thank you again for joining us. Have a good rest of your evening.